Hello everybody, it's Kara from Long Book Garden, and today I'm here with the third and final part of my February wrap-up. I read 28 books in February, which is why there's 3 parts instead of 2. I will link the other ones down below, as well as I'll put content warnings and like videos and people I mention and all of that. So let's get into the last few books here. Hey y'all, so I actually forgot one of the picture books that I read, which means that I actually read 29 books in February. For some reason it hadn't shown up when I sorted my Goodreads by date read, and I also had forgotten to write it down in my reading journal. So I just forgot about it, so I'm going to talk about it here, and I did really enjoy it. It is not a reflection on the book that I forgot about it. But that is The Most Beautiful Thing by Cao Kalia Yang, illustrated by Koa Lee. And I have wanted to read something that was illustrated by Koa Lee for a long time. I've always thought I would really like their style, and it was gorgeous. It looks like this book is partly inspired by the author's childhood experiences as a Hmong refugee, and it talks about a family, it says, with a great deal of love and little money, which is definitely true. And the main character is the young girl who she wants to get braces. She doesn't like her teeth. She thinks they're ugly, but her family can't afford it. And so her grandmother kind of gets her to see things differently a little bit. And it's also just about like family relationships in general. I really loved how much the main character and her siblings like loved and respected their grandmother, and also like vice versa, how much their grandmother loved them. I just think this was a really lovely look at family dynamics and what it was like for them to leave their homeland. And yeah, I just think it did a lot of things really well. Again, the illustrations were lovely. I gave The Most Beautiful Thing 4.5 stars, although like I might end up upping it up later because it really was very well done. Next, I finished Leaving Lyman by Lisa Klein Ransom. This is a companion sequel to Finding Langston, and all these books are set during the Great Migration, and we're following this young boy named Lyman, and we actually met him in the first book, and he was actually the bully in that first book. And in this book we follow what led Lyman to end up in Chicago at the same school that Langston was, and at the beginning of the book something really bad befalls his family. He's from the South and he ends up moving north with some of his family, and yeah, like this book just... I first heard about the series from Amanda, the Curly Reader, and I think when she talked about this book she said something about how like reading this book is so hard because you just see these adults fail this kid over and over and over again. And I absolutely agree. There's like 1 or 2, thankfully, that are good to him, but it hurts so much to see Lyman go through what he does. I think the writing is really good. I think the characterization is really good. Like, I am just so upset on Lyman's behalf at the way that like the things he is asking for are basic. Like he is asking for like basic compassion and love, and he just doesn't, we see him not get them. Or if he gets them, they get taken away. And like this is a pretty short book, and so for that reason it doesn't feel like it like wallows in like the sad things that he's going through. And the way he faces them is it's like he doesn't, like one of the things that's heartbreaking about it is like Lyman, it feels wrong to him, but he doesn't seem to internalize that he shouldn't have to go through what he is. And it hurts, but this was a really good book. I also think it was a really interesting choice that we don't really spend a lot of time crossing over with Langston's story. Like we see what led up to that, and we get from Lyman's perspective why he does the things he does, but this isn't really a book about like apologizing for bullies. But it is a book about understanding where somebody is coming from, and about kids who just don't get the attention they need. And yeah, this is really well done. I feel like I'm making it sound like a lot more of an emotional slog than it was, but again, it is so quick to read that I don't feel like it gets bogged down. Like it does a really good job of like talking about these really difficult things that Lyman goes through, but then also there are some moments of hope. There are some people who are good to him. And this book talks a lot about having a parent in prison and what that is like and what that does. I just thought this book was fantastic, and I gave Leaving Lyman 4.5 stars. Next, I finished Willow Dean by Catherine Applegate, and this is another like very quick read. It's like 200 and something pages, and it's a really small book. There's a lot of space on the page, so like this was like I read this in one evening basically, but it was a really effective book even though it was so short. So we're following our main character, who is an 11-year-old girl named Willow Dean, and this is set in a world that is very much like our own. in a lot of ways, but there are these different like magical creatures, and Willow Dean is basically the only person in her town who cares about these animals called screechers. Everyone else hates them. They think they're smelly, they're annoying, they're loud, they don't contribute anything, and Willow Dean is one of the only people who cares about them. And she starts noticing that the screechers are dying off. Like, people are hunting and killing them, and like they're just not doing well anymore. Like, it's getting really hard for her to even find any that are still around, and nobody else seems to be bothered by this. Everyone else is like, good riddance. And then on top of this, these creatures called, I think, hummingbirds, who everyone loves. They're like really adorable, and they like bring tourism to the town, and like basically they're everything that the screechers are not. And then it seems like they aren't coming to nest anymore, or to, I think they're nests. And so this puts the town in trouble because they really depend on the money from people coming to see these hummingbirds. This was a really fantastic book. I love the focus here on environmentalism and on like ecosystems. The themes were great. I really felt for Willow Dean as a main character, and this world is one that has been really devastated by different climate changes and like some weather things that have happened, and Willow Dean actually lost her family in a really, really horrible fire that happened as a result of that. And the way this book deals with grief in a really subtle way just really got to me, because Willow Dean has kind of tried to separate herself from those memories. She tries to just kind of focus on the here and now. Like, she's very focused on like the things that she's interested in and studying, and like the projects she's working on, and, you know, trying to figure out what's happening with the screechers and the hummingbirds and all of that. So she's very focused, but you can absolutely see throughout the book that she is really traumatized by what happened, like understandably. Like, there's this one part that just really like got me in the heart, where she's thinking about like, she gets taken in by these two really nice old ladies who I really liked, and she gets taken in by them, and even though she's been there for a few years now, when she's coming back, she's thinking to herself like, oh, it's time for me to go home, and then she stops herself and she's like, not home, she's like, just a house. And because the only experience she's ever had with home is a place that she loses, and like, that just really got me. Like, I just really think the way this book deals with grief while not making it the main focus exactly, but it also kind of is the main focus, because these are the people and the beings that we're going to lose if we don't do something about these things. So I thought that was really well done. I really loved the friendship that she formed with this other kid who ends up helping her. Like, I just really, really loved him and their interactions. Just, yeah, I really recommend this one. I gave this book 4 stars, but like, I'm thinking about it now and I'm like, it was really, really good. So I don't know, maybe I'll bump it up at some point, but I really highly recommend this one. I feel like it's one I haven't heard a lot about, but it's very timely and really well done. Next, I finished another picture book, and that was Love in the Library by Magi Takura Hall, illustrated by Yas Imamura. And this is a picture book that is set in the Minidoka incarceration camp for Japanese Americans during World War II. And this is based on, like, inspired by a true story of the author's parents, I believe it was, or grandparents. I think it was grandparents, and the way that these two people end up meeting each other and finding love through the library. And I loved this. I thought this was a really incredible picture book. The art is just really, I don't know, really effective. Like, I thought it was really, like, the art style itself, I really liked the illustrations, but also the color palette was a really, like, a very deliberate choice. I really loved the focus on like words and like the way certain words were repeated and used as themes for the book. The focus on books. I loved getting to see these characters like find each other in this, and I really appreciate how, like, the end of this book, in the author's note, she makes it very clear that this story is not about like, oh, things were bad, but at least they had each other, you know, they got through. Like, her point is like, they never should have had to meet like this. This shouldn't, like, it wasn't like softening the horrible things that happened. It was like, they did manage to scratch something good out of this, but they should not have had to do that. And I really appreciated that distinction. I just think the information at the end in general was really, really well done, and I just appreciate that message that, like, finding something good does not justify the existence of these horrible things. So I just thought this was fantastic. I would highly recommend this, and I gave Love in the Library 5 stars. Next, I finished Lady Windermeres Fan by Oscar Wilde. I say this every time I hold this up, but this is a collection of several of his plays, which is why the title doesn't match. But this was for Pasta Classics. I was the host for this live show. I will link that down below. And this was a reread for me. And once again, I loved this. This is my favorite thing I've read by Oscar Wilde, so I expected to enjoy it. But yeah, I think this is really incredible. So because it's a play, there's like several different main characters, but one of the main ones is Lady Windermere, and she and her husband are very happily married, but then she starts hearing rumors about something that makes her makes her start questioning if they really are so happy together. And so Lady Windermere is faced with a series of really difficult choices. Actually, all the characters are really. And that's one of the things I love about this play is that like the way it handles things like secrets and keeping things from people and trying to make the decision between being honest or if something would hurt somebody too much and so you don't want to tell them. Yeah, I just really, really love this. So this is, I think, technically a comedy, but one of the things I love about it is that even though there is some great humor and the dialogue is great, the wordplay is fantastic, there's also this heart and this emotion underneath it, which even though I love Importance of Being Earnest, I think the reason that Lady Windermere's Fan is my favorite is because it has that humor and that great wordplay, but then it also has this really emotional story and like these themes and these like discussions of what is right and wrong. And like I think this play is just a fantastic commentary on gender and like the expectations of women in this era, the double standards that men and women have. I also think it does a great job of making you understand where the characters are coming from. Like we talk extensively in that live show about how like there's so many characters where it's like, this is not a good move, but I understand why you're making it. Or even characters that we don't like where it's like, well, you were doing this for what you thought was a good reason, but you did this in a horrible way. Or characters that we really sympathize with, but we feel like maybe we shouldn't as much. Like this play just really makes you think a lot about different ethical like dilemmas that come up, and I really love that. So yeah, I really loved reading this again, and I gave Lady Windermere's Fan 5 stars. Next, I finished The Siren of Sussex by Mimi Matthews. This is a proper romance, and it is, I think, her first traditionally published one, which is very exciting. And this is dual perspective. Our female main character is Evelyn Maltravers, who is determined to make a good marriage in order to help take care of her family, but she knows that she doesn't really come off to her best in a ballroom situation or like kind of these social events, but she's a really, really amazing writer. Like she's great at writing horses, and so she has realized that if she can really show herself off to best advantage in these different like promenades that were traditional for like young people who were like taking part in the London season, that she might be able to find a good husband through that. And so she needs some really like amazing writing habits. And so she ends up going to this tailor named Ahmad Malik. He's half Indian, and so a lot of the book does deal with the racism and xenophobia that he experiences and this feeling he has of being caught between these two different cultures, because he obviously doesn't feel welcomed by like white English society, but he also doesn't necessarily feel 100% like part of his Indian heritage and background, which it sounds like from the author's note that the author might have been writing from her own experience as far as that goes. So Evelyn ends up going to him and hiring him to make her some different writing habits, and of course they end up spending a lot more time together, and they start developing feelings for each other, which would not be good for either of them, because Evelyn really needs to marry a rich man who is like upper society, and Ahmad is not, and he has all these plans for starting his own business and taking care of his sister and all of this, and those plans do not really allow for things like falling in love. And I really liked this overall. I really liked our two main characters. I thought they had really good chemistry together. I loved the focus on fashion, like the celebration of clothing and fashion and design, and how wanting to look your best does not make you a shallow person or a bad person. I also didn't know anything about the pretty horse breakers, so that was really fascinating. I like the way that this book touched on different social issues, again, like racism and also classism and like gender expectations and things like that. I was also just really into like the setup of this one, because I am realizing that I am very into these like romances between like self-made or like working man and like the young woman who is like, I don't know, it's like not that she's wealthy, but like that she's kind of the, I like when books highlight the like the way that even the poorer like middle class would still look down on tradespeople, like, because Evelyn doesn't, but her peers kind of do, and I really like when books comment on that. This also explains why I really love North and South. I just find that setup much more interesting than the like, she's a rich wealthy heiress and he's a poor farm boy or like whatever. I just find this much more interesting, so I really liked that as well. And I also really loved the female friendship here, like the little girl squad that Evelyn had. I loved them. I think we're setting up for them to be the heroines of the other books in this series, so I love that. And I also really appreciate that the like initial conflict felt very believable, or like the initial obstacle, because sometimes it feels like you read like a book where there's this couple that can't be together, and one of the reasons they can't be together is because like one person needs to invest in like a business and the other person's dream is to open their own business, and it's like, you guys really can't see how you could work this out between you. And this book didn't do that. Like I actually, like, it made sense why their feelings for each other would interfere with their goals, and like it wasn't immediately obvious what they would have to do to try and fix that. So I really liked all of that. I did have some issues though. One was like some writing things, like the way that Ahmad is described sometimes was very weird. Like there's like 3 or 4 times in the book he's referred to as like a fallen angel, for example, like he looks like one. And like I just thought that was odd, because in the other parts of the book it does a really good job of commenting on the like derogatory and also fetishizing language like applied to him. So I don't know, I feel like that was a weird word choice, and some other word choice things weren't my favorite. Also, I'm never a big fan of when characters meet and they're instantly attracted to each other. Like, I fully acknowledge that happens in real life all the time, so I'm not saying it's unrealistic. I just think personally it's very uninteresting to read about. Especially because like Evelyn and Ahmad would be like in very close proximity, and like I said, their chemistry was good, but there would be a lot of things where like a lot of moments where one of them, especially at the beginning, they'd be like, I don't understand why I'm so fixated on them. This is so sudden. And I'm reading it and I'm like, it is. And pointing it out doesn't really fix it. And then also there were some kind of like subplots or sub-conflicts that I think, I don't know, I think they could have been cut or shortened. Like I think there was enough going on without them, but overall I did really like this. I gave the Siren of Sussex 3.75 stars, and I'm really excited to continue the series and reading more from this author in general. Next, I finished Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This is the 3rd and final book in the Farseer trilogy, and it is like a zillion pages long. This was my least favorite book in the series, and I have some thoughts. I think I'll probably have to do a whole series review, but even with that, I just have a lot of things I need to talk through with this book. So I really hated this. This was my first 1-star book of the year. I gave Assassin's Quest 1.5 stars. I'll start with the like 2 things that I liked, which is there were still a handful of characters out of these many characters that I actually genuinely cared about. And then the other thing is I think some of the information that we finally get in this book is interesting, like the explanations we get. Other than that, I did not have a good time. This was excruciatingly long and detailed. Like, this is 838 pages, and like nothing happens for most of those pages. Like, I can't believe we were like 300 or 400 pages in before the first plot relevant thing actually happened. Like, I can't believe it. I feel like I'm being punked. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand how you tell a book this long and you say so little. Yeah, also Fitz is a colossal idiot. I mentioned in the second book that he actually, like, I liked him more. Well, this book makes me consider putting him on my worst main characters list because he is so stupid. He is so stupid. Like, he's just like annoying and obnoxious. Like, I can be fine with characters making bad choices if I understand why they make them. But that did not happen here. Like, Fitz would just do the dumbest possible thing every time for no apparent reason. Or like the only reason would be that Robin Hobb wanted to add another 200 pages to the book. And that brings me to one of my like overarching complaints with the books I've read from her so far. And that is that she makes her books predictable in her own very specific ways. Because people talk about like how like emotional and sad her books can be. But the thing, like the problem with that is that you get to a point where you can predict everything that's going to happen because it's always the worst thing that can happen. I mean, with very few exceptions. Once in a while, she'll throw you a tiny scrap of happiness to, I guess, keep you coming back for more. But the majority of the time, like, if you're at a situation where you're trying, like, some, you know, characters are making decisions or you're trying to figure out what's going to happen, it's like, think of the most depressing thing that could happen in that situation, especially if it would add 300 pages to the book, and then that's what's going to happen. And I feel like this book did that a lot. Also, I don't even like books about assassins, but I guess the only thing worse than reading a book about an assassin is reading a book about an incompetent assassin. Like, Fitz is so bad at his job. Really, like, the only scene... Okay, there's a couple scenes I liked. Molly finally had a good scene after 3 books of being like one of the worst written characters I've ever read. It's not her fault she's such a bad character, but she got one good scene in this book. That was cool. There also was a scene at the very beginning of this book where basically some of Fitz's like friends or mentors have like an intervention with him, and they're basically like, Fitz, we love you, but you're kind of an idiot, so we're just not going to tell you our plans anymore because you keep screwing them up, okay? Okay. And Fitz is like so hurt and offended and surprised, and it's like somebody needed to tell him though. So I thought that was hilarious. There were some things he made, like some decisions he made in the second book where like at the time I was just glad he was doing something, but seeing what happened in the third book, I'm like, no, they're right. That really wasn't a good move. It was also just very satisfying for somebody to tell Fitz he was stupid, because he is. So yeah, really long, really boring. The ending of this book is one of the least satisfying conclusions I have ever had the misfortune to read. And there's several reasons for that. One of them is because it involved one of the only characters I gave a shit about. So I hate that for me. But even without that, like obviously there's that personal element of like, why did it have to be this character? I'm like, please somebody just kill Fitz instead. But also just on a plot level, it was so unsatisfying and it made no sense, because immediately after this happened, like, and I knew this was gonna happen. The whole time I'm like, I know what's gonna happen. And that's what happened. It was like immediately after this big thing happened, they found another way. And I'm like, I'm so mad. Like, I'm laughing because I'm angry. I hated that so much. I continue to hate the treatment of the female characters in this series. Again, we get like a couple of female characters who I love. Like Catracan, love her. Patience, love her. That's it. All of the other female characters are mostly non-existent. Or if we do get them, they're written so bad that it like offends me personally. Also, there are so many sections of this series where it feels like they were written by a very specific kind of male fantasy author. And it's not the worst I've ever read in that regard, but I was expecting a lot better compared to how much people love Robin Hobb. I was just really disappointed in that. Like, the way that women's bodies are described, the way female characters are introduced, the way female characters' goals are framed, like the casual misogyny that is throughout the book, in the narration and in like the things that happen and the way characters talk to each other or think about each other. And it's not done, like, this is the thing, is it's not written in a way that we're supposed to disagree with it, I feel like. Also, another thing that makes this feel like it was written by a very particular kind of male author is the sheer number of random women who Fitz meets and who immediately are desperate to sleep with him is absolutely ridiculous. Like, this guy, like, we're told over and over about how dirty and gross Fitz is. He like gets the opportunity to bathe like once a month. He smells like sheep because he's working as a sheep boy for like part of the book. He's constantly getting his face smashed in. Like, the book goes so overboard, making us understand how utterly undesirable he is, but clearly something's going on because these women are desperate to sleep with him. And he also has the personality of a soggy paper towel. So like, really, what is the draw here? I don't understand. It was like, literally, I'm not exaggerating, every single female character he crosses paths with who is even remotely in his age group is like desperate to get in his pants, and it makes no sense. I also feel like Robin Hobb continues to try to force us to feel certain things rather than writing the book in such a way that we do feel those things. Again, with like characters and character relationships and all of that. Like, I am just really, really disappointed with this book. And this is one of those cases where I would, like, if this book were substantially shorter, I still would not have like enjoyed it, but I don't think I would be as angry. But it's like, I was hating these things for 838 pages, you know? I just can't get over how nothing happens. Like, I don't understand. And then besides the book being like way too long, I also think part of it is that I went into this series knowing people love this. Like, I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've seen something critical said about Robin Hobb books. Like, people almost universally adore them. And so like, if this were just like any other book that I had just picked up and read myself, it's like, I would have been disappointed in this book. I would have been mad at this book. I would have, yes, like, this would have been a disappointing end to a series, but it wouldn't have made me so like angry, like so personally disappointed and angry. I don't know. But I also don't think that my feelings can just be explained by like, oh, it was overhyped. Like, no, there are problems with this book, I think. And I just need to stop before I ramble on way too long again. I know I've already been talking way too much about this one book, but I had a lot of feelings and thoughts. I gave Assassin's Quest 1.5 stars, but I am liking the live ship books a lot more so far, so there's that. Next, I finished The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary. This is, I don't know if it's like a contemporary or a romance book, because I'm not very good on that designation, which I think is one of the reasons why some people were disappointed in this one, actually, is like expectations. And I actually listened to this on audiobook. I know, who am I? And I'm really glad that I saw Amanda from The Curly Reader recommend the audiobook specifically, because we know I don't do a lot of audiobooks, they're very difficult for me, but the reason she specifically recommended this one is because she said that the male characters' chapters are written in a very specific way that is intentionally very choppy, and she said that hearing it narrated was a really good choice because of the way that the writing flowed a lot better hearing it as opposed to reading it. And I had read like the first chapter or so of this book, and then when I got to the male characters chapters, I immediately was like, oh yeah, I see what she means. Like I wasn't really liking the way the sentences were broken up so much, and so I switched to the audiobook and I listened to the audio while reading along, and I'm so glad I did because I loved the audio and I really enjoyed this book. Like I really love this book overall. So it's narrated by Carrie Hope Fletcher for Tiffy, the female main character, and then the male narrator is Kwaku Fortune for Leon, who's the male character. And I have never followed any of Carrie Hope Fletcher's work before this, but I thought she did an amazing job. And she made Tiffy feel like really just warm and genuine and lovely, and I just really enjoyed the way she performed her character. Like, not saying that I wouldn't have liked her if I read the book physically, but I think that her character type can sometimes come off a little like fake quirky almost. I don't know if that would have happened with this book, but with Carrie Hope Fletcher narrating her, it definitely didn't happen. She just was so like lovely and warm and genuine, and I just loved her. And then I loved Kwaku Fortune's narration for Leon. He just has the most lovely like Irish accent and just voice, and I could listen to him read things all day. I was very sad that he has not narrated on any other audiobooks so far, but I thought he did a wonderful job. And like Amanda was saying, I think that him reading Leon's chapters really helped me get into the flow of that style. So I should actually tell you what this book is about, even though a lot of people know about it. So we're following Tiffy and Leon, and Tiffy ends up being in a situation where she really desperately needs a roommate, like a place to live. She's recently broken up with her boyfriend, and she can't live in their place anymore, and so she ends up taking up this offer from Leon, who is trying to find a flatmate or a roommate. And he's a palliative care nurse, and he does a lot of like night shifts, so he doesn't even like use the place during the day, and he's like, well, this is a waste of money and I need the money to help like make rent and everything. So he puts out this ad for a flat share that is also going to be a like room and bed share, so it's like the only one bed trope, but like not at the same time. And I feel like actually the book did a pretty good job of setting up like why, yes, it's a silly, like it's kind of a ridiculous premise, but also how it kind of makes sense and you understand why these characters would do the things they're doing. And you also understand what's at stake here, especially for Tiffy and why she does need a place to stay. And so yeah, and they start leaving each other notes and communicating, and I just really loved this. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I think part of the reason that this got very mixed reviews is expectations. This is definitely not a light and fluffy romance. I think there are a lot of parts that are really sweet and really cute and like warm and fuzzy and everything, but this book also does deal with some pretty heavy ideas, and I don't think that was always clear from the synopsis. Like Leon's brother is currently in prison for a crime he didn't commit, so the book talks a lot about incarceration, and then Tiffy is realizing throughout the book that her previous romantic relationship was actually abusive. And I think the way that is done, it's handled with so much care, I feel like, and thoughtfulness. And I think those things are handled really well, but I think that might throw some people off if you're not expecting it, so just go in knowing that. But I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I loved Tiffy and Leon as characters. I really loved their romance. Like their interactions through notes and also in person was just really wonderful. I loved how supportive they were of each other and of what they were going through. I really loved Tiffy's like friend group. Especially like there was a couple of them where I wasn't sure how I'd get on with them at the beginning, but I ended up really liking them. She works in publishing too, so that was a fun element. And I really appreciated getting to see some of Leon's work as a palliative care nurse, which, as I've learned recently, and he talks about it in the book too, it's not just end-of-life care. Like that is an important thing they do, but it's also about just like providing comfort for people. I forget how he says it, but there's this really great line where he's like, our job is to make something that is always going to be hard a little easier or a little more comfortable or something. So I really thought this was wonderful. I only had a couple of things that didn't work for me. One is, I think there were a couple of times where I feel like Tiffy's friends maybe should have said something more assertive about, because they recognized what was going on with her past, with her ex-boyfriend, and I understand why they wouldn't want to like scare her away from them, you know, by confronting her about it, so I totally understand that. But there were a couple of times later where it felt weird that they didn't say something. Like there's a point where several characters later in the book are like thinking that, wow, she should really get a restraining order against this guy, and like we see that she really should, but they don't do that because they're like, well, it should be her decision, I don't want to pressure her. And it's like, I totally get that and I respect that, like not wanting to like talk her into something she's uncomfortable with, but I don't think it's out of line for like someone you care about to be like, hey, don't forget you have this option, you might want to think about it. Like just reminding her it's an option is not pushing her into it, you know? So that was kind of weird. And then the other thing is there's a side character who is identified as asexual, but then it seems like maybe that's not the case. I feel like either the author didn't actually know what that word meant, or it was used as like a joke, which is also not great. So I didn't love those things, but other than that, I really loved this book and I gave the Flatshare 4.5 stars. And then finally, the last book I finished in February was another picture book, and that is Watercress by Andrea Wong, illustrated by Jason Chin. And this was beautiful. This has won a bunch of awards and I totally see why. It's about a young girl who is embarrassed by, I don't want to explain too much about what it is, but it's like she's embarrassed by something that her family does, and her family uses that as a way to talk about their culture and their family and their values. And I just thought this was really, really beautiful. I feel like this is a perfect example of how picture books can do so much amazing storytelling in such a tiny format, like so few pages and words. But it's beautiful, and the illustrations were also fantastic, so I really, really loved this one. And I gave Watercress 5 stars. Okay, everybody, so those are the rest of the 28 books I read in February. That was a lot. I don't think I'm going to try to do that again in the foreseeable future, but I think it went well for the first time trying it. And I didn't want to mention it while I was doing it because I didn't know if I'd be able to accomplish it, but because I did, you're hearing about it. Let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye! And I'm very excited to continue the series and reading more from me, And I'm really excited to continue the series and reading more from this author in general.